Well, as I wrote in the chat, unfortunately, Michaela is not with us today. But certainly, if you have any comments or observations on her presentation, I mean, please feel free to share them. We especially like her final slide in this beautiful wooden structure, and using that as a metaphor for the AKIS. Oh, we've got a microphone open somewhere. Oh, that sounds better. So, but at the same time, I see also that the discussion in the chat has been moving forward as well. I see a question from Gabriella in Greece, which we will definitely, as Inge said, I mean, that's highly relevant, your question, to the final session of the day. So we will carry that forward. But also we have a very important question from Evangelia, I think, regarding the AKIS coordination bodies. Inge's just written into the chat, but I think actually, Inge, I would invite you to respond also orally, because this is a very important point.
Yes, I think Evangelia's question was about, is it really obligatory to have such a coordination body? And yes, it's part of the Kaplan template. You will need to put there a person, most probably somebody from the ministry, because there's money involved here and performance and everything. And the simple reason why it's needed is because we need a contact point, a person, a unit with whom we can connect to see in how far progress is improving, and also to help you, as we are doing today. If you have bilateral questions on the situation in your country, this will be the person with whom we then probably our unit B2 will have the connection, and with whom we can suggest maybe improvements or solve problems or whatever. So yes, it is obligatory.
Thank you for that, Inge. And Evangelia, if you look into the Google Docs, you will see again that for some member states who are basically also in the same situation, they're saying, you know, we haven't made a decision yet, we're not sure what to do, but we do have some preliminary ideas from other member states about where they will place their coordination units. You might find some inspiration there, but also very interestingly, we have some colleagues who are sharing also some ideas about how they propose the governance level, the higher level agreements between different ministries, for example. So there's lots of interesting ideas in the Google Docs. So please do take a look. Now, one of the things also which has emerged in the Google Docs is some concern, an inevitable and obvious concern amongst network support units about the capacity and the need for further capacity development in order to fulfill their increased responsibilities as CAP networks. Inge, do you have any observations on this particular issue? Because also in one of the earlier webinars, we had a discussion about the transition, about managing the transition, about maybe some of the specific challenges that might be associated with outsourced network support units, the importance of getting the timing right with procurement procedures, etc., etc. Anything you'd like to share or observations you'd like to make on this issue?
Well, I might repeat that we have a nice transition period in which as well the old NRN as also the newly selected or tendered, if there is a tendering, CAP network is going to start up so that they can bring over the good things from the past to the future. Maybe they will be the same, then it's obvious, there's no problem. But certainly when it's contracted and it's becoming another contractor, there is a need to inform and to help the new one to get going. Of course, we also have a lot of CAP networks in our that are sitting in our administrations. My expectation is that we will have less changes there. What I do see is that probably because of the EIP and because of the AKIS policy, etc., we are more and more shifting departments. You see new departments arising that combine education, so training, with advice and even science in one big department. And these are nice things to see, because then the lines are much shorter than when they are in a separate further department, maybe also under the Ministry of Agriculture. But anyway, I think the challenge is also, and that's not only a challenge for the CAP networks, it is they will be even dependent, in my view, on what the managing authority and the ministry is deciding. But it could be very helpful if, for the work of the CAP networks, if the ministries amongst themselves or the departments amongst themselves, if research and advice and training and the CAP networks are in separated parts or in separated ministries, if there are some high-level agreements that give the authorization to, for instance, typically the researchers to work for practice, because the usual trend is still that they are evaluated on the number of scientific publications. So if we want to turn this around and get our researchers into our AKIS, we need to make sure that they are allowed to do so and that their hierarchy is supporting that. And these are kind of things that really need to be dealt with at relatively high level, because this is all about how do you evaluate a researcher and what do you think is important, etc. I would advise you in this sense to look to one of the presentations of the September EIP-AGRI seminar, where IRTA has shown a very detailed follow-up of the work of advisors, of researchers, in fact, for practice. They made a whole program. It's part of their mission. It's one of the 3 things that is in the mission of their institute. And they even follow it up, let's say, hour by hour. So this is maybe extreme, maybe not. I leave that to your own judgment. But in principle, it would be good that researchers, they are in a system that currently doesn't allow them sufficiently. We do have enough, as I said, in our operational groups, and we have enough multi-actor projects, so we always find people. But to broaden this even, don't forget that in Cluster 6 Horizon 2020, now all the topics, not only the agriculture food topics, but also the marine, the biomass, the non-food chains, the biodiversity, environmental things, they are all under Cluster 6, and they are all able now to use a multi-actor approach. So there will also be researchers there who will need to be working for practice and maybe work on subjects that don't deliver scientific publications. So it's good that their hierarchy is aware about that, and that talks, at least talks, are being done at that level, and hopefully that agreements are being made between these ministries, between these departments, that allow then the researchers more freely, not just from their own goodwill, because they are persons, they also want to see their work used. It's much more nicer to see if a farmer applies what you have developed than to see it in a paper or on a computer somewhere. So these contacts also as a human being are very rewarding. But we cannot work on that alone. We need more than that. We need also to get the hierarchy involved in this, and that's why the ministries or departments talking with each other, so that advisors, researchers, and CAP networks, who must profit then from that, are working better together. That's the essence of Article 102, but of course all these details are not in there. But I can assure you that it's very important to get your hierarchy involved in this. I don't know, Mark, if that's enough, or as you wish.
I think that's a very, very important point, and I think I just wanted to add to that, because In the earlier webinars, I mean, at this point of the discussion, we had several network support units who were saying, yes, we see the challenges, but also, we're starting to feel overwhelmed. You're asking, there's a very high level of expectation, and, okay, we understand we need to be strategic. We understand that we need to get our hierarchy involved, but, we're feeling overwhelmed. And you gave a very important piece of advice. And I think, you advise them to think about this as a process more of evolution, not as revolution. Yes, clearly, there is a very important change. This is a process of transition. But you also highlighted that, there was not an expectation that everything happens immediately. And I think you talked about, the importance of setting priorities that were relevant to national, regional context, being pragmatic, planning carefully, resourcing carefully, but not rushing into it thinking that everything needed to be addressed immediately. Do you want us to elaborate or to pick up on that point just before we close for lunch?
Yes, because I completely agree with what you're saying, but there's a little danger in this. And we've seen this in the current rural development programs, that the training and the advisory measures, they are small measures with a lot of invoices, a lot of work for the administration. So they are easily put later and later and later, and then eventually not being used. So it is important to start from the very beginning. So I agree that it is something that will grow slowly, but making a big effort in getting AKIS platforms together to brainstorm on how can we do this better, or how can we improve our interactions, etc. Which interventions do we put in place? And then I think we will have a number of new interventions on which, of course, we will learn by doing. And that is the part what you are calling probably the evolution. But it's very important to really get it right from the start, because my experience is that once the CAP plan is approved, okay, we can change CAP plans every year. There's always a possibility for modification. That's not the issue. But the issue is, in my experience, the national level and the political influences there. And once regulations are made there, they don't like to change them anymore. So small changes in the calls that you can always do if it doesn't relate directly to what is in the regulation. But the best example is, in fact, that we saw that our advisory measure under rural development didn't work well. In the omnibus in 2017, we took away that obligation of public procurement, and there was very little done. And I've also often asked, why don't you, now that you're free of public procurement, why don't you, again, as you did in the period before, get all your advisors in? And often the reply was, well, with our politicians and new regulations, it's all not so simple. So really take a good start, I would say. And I am absolutely agreeing that we will learn by doing. And as I will say probably in one of the next presentations, we even have a 10 million project to accompany you in this getting better and better. We know it's like that. It was for the EIP the same. So we accept that. There's no problem. But don't take this as a reason not to do the AKIS brainstorming now very thoroughly with everybody involved, not just one person behind his desk drafting a few interventions, but discussing a lot. Take your time. You still have in principle, now it's getting short because the CAP plans need to be with the Commission on the 1st of January. But even a little bit later, the adoption will only come at the end of next year. So I would say that means that you have more than a year to do all this brainstorming and to really devise good measures. And it's not too late. Once the CAP plan has been given to the Commission for approval, to add, before we have approved, a measure that you have discovered later on. So I would say start from the very beginning with good thinking, trying to make good measures, and then you will see it's learning by doing, and that's the part which you call evolution.
Yeah, super. Thank you very, very much for that clarification, Inge. Thank you for that important emphasis that you've put upon this preliminary preparation, putting all of the structures in place in order then to facilitate, to allow that longer term process of learning by doing. Really important clarification.